My nephew didn't ask to borrow money. He had himself added to my bank account as a convenience, then systematically drained my pension as if he was closing out a bar tab. In the Navy, you learn to watch for silent threats, the leak you can't hear, the pressure build you can't feel. I spent 30 years anticipating danger from the sea. I never trained for the enemy that would come bearing a latte and a smile, disguised as my own flesh and blood. It began during my convalescence. The heart surgery had been a success, but it had left me feeling fragile, a sensation I despised. Jason and Olivia were constant, fluttering presences. "Let us help," Aunt Maggie, Olivia would coo, her phone always in hand, documenting what she called family caregiving goals. Jason handled the practicalities. "It's just easier if I'm on the account," he'd said, his tone so reasonable. "For prescriptions, groceries. One less thing for you to worry about." I, a woman who had commanded a vessel of 300 souls, signed the form. It felt like surrender. The discovery came 6 months later. A prescription refill was denied. Insufficient funds. I logged into my banking portal, my hands, which had once steadied themselves against a rolling deck, now trembling over the keyboard. The numbers were a gut punch. My pension, my life security, had been bled dry. Transaction after transaction to LiveLux Ventures. The sums were staggering. "Think of it as diversifying your portfolio, Aunt Maggie," Jason said when I confronted him, patting my hand. His touch felt like a spider crawling on my skin. "Your money was just sitting there, gathering dust." Olivia scrolled through her phone, showing me glossy pictures of photo shoots and product launches. "We're building an empire. You should be proud you're part of our founding story." I looked at the bank statement, the numbers so low they felt like a physical blow. "This was my survival, Jason. Not your seed money." He just smiled, a cold, empty thing. "You have us to take care of you now. You don't need all that." The silence in my apartment after they left was deafening. I was a decorated officer, brought to her knees by a Venmo request. Humiliation burned hotter than any fever. That's when I called Benjamin Carter. Ben was at my door in 20 minutes, his laptop already open. He was the son of my oldest friend, a man I'd taught to tie a bowline knot when he was 8. Now he was a forensic accountant, his mind a scalpel for financial deceit. "Tell me everything, Captain," he said, his tone all business, and the old title, spoken with respect, straightened my spine. 2 days later, his email was a declaration of war. "Maggie, it's worse than we thought. The VA has a specific Veterans Financial Abuse Protection Clause. Any large, unauthorized transfers to a non-spouse following a major medical event trigger an automatic federal audit. They didn't just steal from you. They broke a federal law." And Olivia's brand, it's a pyramid scheme. The investments were for a luxury car and a closet full of designer handbags. "I'm sending the files to the Attorney General now." I read the email 3 times. The fear began to curdle into something else. Something colder. Something that felt like battle stations. Our counterattack was a masterclass in tactical precision. I played my part, the weakened, confused old woman, too proud to admit she'd been ruined. Meanwhile, Ben's reports snaked their way through the federal bureaucracy. The VA froze my pension account and launched its own investigation. Simultaneously, he anonymously delivered a damning dossier to the Financial Regulatory Commission, triggering a swift and public collapse of LiveLux. Olivia's influencer empire crumbled overnight, her investors screaming for blood online. Cornered, their finances frozen, and their glossy public image in tatters, Jason fought back with a weapon designed to scuttle my entire legacy. He came to my apartment alone, his face a mask of desperate fury. He didn't mention the money. He slid a single, grainy photograph across my coffee table. It showed my father, a man I'd revered my entire life, wearing the uniform of a foreign power, a nation the U.S. had engaged in a bloody, covert conflict with decades ago. "He wasn't the war hero you think he was, Aunt Maggie," Jason hissed, his voice low and venomous. "He was an agent. A traitor. I'll go to the press. I'll tell them the great Captain Sterling's legacy is built on a lie. They'll revoke your pension, your benefits. You'll be a pariah. Call off the dogs. recant your statements, or I burn it all down. I felt the deck lurch beneath my feet. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about my father's honor, my own service, the very core of who I was. My naval training, breathe, assess, act kicked in a life-saving autopilot. Ben and I became a two-person intelligence agency. He dug through declassified archives, cross-referencing dates and locations. I reached out to the few remaining contacts I had from the old days. The truth we uncovered was more incredible than Jason's lie. My father hadn't been a traitor. He had been a ghost. Part of a top-secret Allied deep-cover operation, his defection, a carefully staged ruse to feed misinformation to the enemy. The mission was still largely redacted, but its existence was corroborated in a meticulously researched book by a renowned military historian, Dr. Eris Thorne. We didn't just defend. We launched a broadside. I called a press conference. I stood at the podium, not as a victim, but as a captain. Dr. Thorne stood beside me, explaining the historical context of the photograph. I held up my father's Medal of Freedom, its blue ribbon vivid against my dark blazer. My nephew, I said, my voice carrying across the silent room, attempted to blackmail me with my own father's courage. He sought to desecrate the memory of a man who risked everything for his country, all for money. This is not just a family dispute. It is a profound betrayal of the very concept of honor. The public backlash was immediate and absolute. Jason and Olivia weren't just thieves, they were monsters. The conclusion was swift. Charged with multiple counts of elder financial abuse and wire fraud, they accepted a plea deal. The VA restored my pension with full back pay and significant damages for emotional distress. I stand now on my balcony, looking out at the sea. The trusting woman is gone, replaced by a vigilant guardian. They saw my discipline as coldness and my legacy as a target. They failed to understand that a captain knows how to navigate a storm. To anyone feeling adrift from a betrayal, remember, plot your coordinates carefully, trust your instruments, and never, ever abandon ship. The waters may be treacherous, but a steady hand and a true compass will always see you through. The plea deal should have been the end of it. Justice served, balance restored. But the silence that settled in my apartment after the sentencing felt less like peace and more like the eerie calm before a hurricane makes landfall. In the Navy, you learn that the most dangerous part of a storm is often the deceptive lull in its center. Jason and Olivia were facing prison time, but the damage they'd inflicted had a longer tail than I'd anticipated. The first sign was a series of anonymous, one-star reviews for my building. Poor security, they read. Elderly residents targeted. Then, a fake, weepy social media post from a friend of Olivia's, claiming I was a vindictive old woman who had manipulated the system to destroy a young family. The digital whispers were meant to erode my peace, to make me feel watched and slandered even in my own home. It was a guerrilla war fought in the shadows of the internet. Ben, who had become a permanent fixture in my life, saw it for what it was. They're trying to poison the well, Captain, he said, his brow furrowed as he showed me the posts on his laptop. They can't touch your finances anymore, so they're going after your sense of safety. It's psychological warfare. My naval training hadn't covered social media smear campaigns, but it had covered insurgency. You find the source and you cut it off. But the source was already in custody. This was different. The next salvo was more personal. I received a formal, legal-looking letter from a concerned neighbor petitioning the condo board to have me declared a nuisance due to the constant stream of official visitors and negative media attention, claiming it was devaluing the property. The letter was riddled with legalese, but the threat was clear. They were trying to have me evicted from my own home. It was signed by a name I didn't recognize, but the phrasing had Olivia's melodramatic flair all over it. She must have drafted it before her sentencing, a final, spiteful arrow loosed from her bow. This was no longer just about me. They were threatening the home I'd shared with my husband, the last place that held the echoes of a life built on service and integrity. The cold fury I'd felt before returned, but this time it was sharper, more focused. They had mistaken my discipline for passivity. Ben, I said, my voice calm and steady. We're not playing defense anymore. We went on the offensive. First, I took the fake petition to my actual neighbors, people I'd lived alongside for 15 years. I showed them the letter, explained the situation frankly, and was met with immediate and fierce support. They saw the attempt for what it was, a cruel and cowardly act. The condo board not only dismissed the petition, but issued a statement of support for me. Then, we targeted the digital front. Ben, with his forensic skills, was able to trace the IP addresses of the fake reviews and the social media post back to a single, prepaid data card. While we couldn't prove it was Jason or Olivia directly, we could prove it was a coordinated attack. We compiled the evidence, the fake petition, the traced IPs, the timing of the reviews, and sent it to their parole board and the judge overseeing their case. We argued that this was a continuation of their predatory behavior, showing a profound lack of remorse and a continued willingness to harass their victim. The result was decisive. Their plea deals were revisited. Their sentences were lengthened, and strict no-contact orders were put in place, explicitly forbidding them from communicating about me through third parties or online platforms. The final, satisfying silence that followed was different. It was earned. It was the silence of a threat neutralized. Ben still comes for dinner every Sunday. We don't talk about Jason or Olivia. We talk about the sea, about his work, about my late husband. He brought me a new, secure tablet and taught me how to monitor my own accounts. "Vigilance, Captain," he'd said with a smile. "The watch never ends." He's right. I am the captain of this ship, this life. I learned that some storms don't just pass, they change the very nature of the sea. I am more guarded now, my trust a fortified port, not an open harbor. But I am also not alone. I look at Ben, this brilliant young man who stood by me without hesitation, and I see a different kind of legacy. Not one of blind trust, but of loyalty earned and respect given. The sea outside my window is calm today, a vast, blue expanse of possibilities. They tried to run me aground, but my hull is sound, my compass is true, and I have a first officer I can trust. The journey isn't over. It's just entering a new and more peaceful